Shifting sands reflect change that is gradual and never-ending, making it the perfect theme for this year's Eval Fest. It was a 3-day evaluation festival that brought together some of the world's finest sector experts, creating a melting pot of ideas, innovations, and insights. We at Sambodhi deeply care about bringing these learnings to you, our audience, but with a twist of our own. Presenting Evidence Dialogues, a conversation series which was born out of the many stories that were left uncaptured during the sessions at Eval Fest. In this series, we have a stellar lineup of sector experts talking about their experiences and the many learnings they've gathered in their journey to bring transformation. Stay tuned. We spoke to Jahnvi Andharia, Director and Research Fellow at the Institute of Social Studies Trust. With her, we discussed gender-responsive evaluations, developing capacities around the same, and also bringing change through continued and resilient efforts, not just by the ecosystem players, but also by the society as whole. Thank you so much for joining us, Jahnvi. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya. It's also a pleasure to be here.
My first question is about gender lenses in evaluations. Pehle there used to be gender-specific studies, but nowadays gender has become a cross-cutting theme, right? But are we still doing enough to ensure that our evaluations are gender-responsive? Is making gender a cross-cutting theme enough?
So in fact, Aishwarya, I'd go a step further. I think we now have been talking about gender issues for, if you say that, since 1970s, right? That was the time when we had the whole decade of women's movement. And it's what, nearly 50 years, right? Since we've been talking about why women-led development, women-oriented development, women's empowerment. All of this was already known to us by the end of the last century. And I think that the whole system has been extremely tardy and, very, very slow in responding because, gender norms, patriarchy, I don't think they change fast enough. Yeah. However, for us at ISST, we've always said that what we need to look at is a gender transformative approach and a gender transformative lens. Why would we say that? Because I feel that even responsive is like saying that, okay, it is a demand-driven thing. If something comes up, then we will respond. Yeah. But we know now that patriarchy exists through the family structure, through the community structures, through the market structures, and through the state structures. So if you want to really talk about reaching gender equality, or you want to ensure that, gender equality is the goal that we need to we all believe in, and that's also a human right, that's also a human development goal, then we need to talk about these structures which are perpetuating gender inequality. And therefore, when we say gender transformative, what we are saying is that it's not enough that a woman's mindset changes. It's not enough to make the woman aware. It's not just enough to get the system to say that, okay, we'll look at health, we'll look at water, we'll look at all the various gendered needs and the gendered roles that women are performing, so that there's less drudgery or they have better access. But to say that even after giving them access to water, the filling of water, ensuring that water is always stayed with the women. Yeah. And we know that there is so much of pressure on women to do these kind of roles which are, drudgery related, these are not dignified. They still lie at their doorstep, on their shoulders, as I say, in their hearts and in their minds. We often say that, they look after children out of love, they feed us out of love. Well, nobody's saying that. But why is that limited to women? Why can't men love children? Why can't men love cooking? And today we do have a lot of men cooking, but it's still seen as shaukia.
Yeah.
And we don't...
It's a profession.
Yeah. Or in the house, or a hobby, that, my husband cooks very well. And but it's not seen as a systemic thing about where we are saying that, okay, why is care only primarily still a woman's job? And why don't we celebrate the men also who are doing this and not seeing them as a aberration or like at the end of the two spectrum in a bell curve. Okay, here are these wonderful men who are doing it, but we need that to happen at the top of the bell curve, and that's what we say is you need to be going beyond being even responsive, and we say we need to be transformative. So we need to look at what are the structural barriers. Now, for instance, if you will say that okay, men are happy to cook, but they also have to be the breadwinner. Now that also needs to be changed. Who decided that only the man should be the breadwinner? Why can't a woman also be considered as quote unquote a breadwinner? But again we have barriers, is that woman cannot earn more than the man. वो घर की इज्जत का सवाल है. And that's a problem with how we look at it. Or can a woman do a job which is going to require her to come late, leave early, or having to go to many cities, travel around when her children are growing? She does that with amazing amount of guilt, because she's carrying the burden that okay, I'm somehow being a less of a mother because I'm following my career goals. And I think these are structural, these are gender norms which we need to transform, not just change, transform. It's a long journey, but I think that if that is the goal we set, that's what will get us better and faster to towards gender equality. Because this was already known, right? And it's only been in few years that we said, oh, we need gender disaggregated data. So that was the lowest, hanging fruit, that everybody said, let's do gender disaggregated data. Now everybody is turning around and saying that, no, we need to do more.
That's true. In fact, even in that line of thought, evaluation specialists and sectoral experts, we have, for gender focused evaluations, we have gender experts who are part of the process, and of course they should be there. But don't you think it's important that every person in the team be sensitive about gender and also have that capacity so that they can approach the project the same way a gender specialist would do that?
So there's no straight yes and no answer to this, because I think that yes, understanding, doing gender analysis, doing understanding gender in a technical way, just as you need to understand health in a technical way, or you need to understand climate change in a technical way. In many ways, gender is also a technical subject, but gender is also so much about norms, which cuts across. So I think we need to arrive at a balance, because the flip side of your question is that, do you really need a specialist? If all of us are gender sensitized, we might as well do a gender sensitized health, a gender sensitized climate change. Then why do you need a specialist? So I think we need a balance. It should not be an either or, it has to be an and I agree with that thought behind the question, that should you then leave it only to the specialist? I agree with that no. I think that we should not leave it to the specialist. It should be in everybody's lens, that if you have a health technical person, they're going to be able to look at not only, okay, there is a toilet or there is, access to water, but who is responsible for the cleaning of the toilet? Who is responsible for the getting of the water? And what are the burdens that are being put on women in order to say that, okay, the toilet is clean, but you have to ask the question that who is doing it? Right. And what is it doing to her workload? Or is it that because now there is a toilet that can be easily cleaned, the men are taking over? I don't know. Maybe they are taking over. But I think these are the questions that need to be asked. And we should not go with any predefined notions that okay, only the women are doing drudgery, because as far as our data tells us that in the care responsibilities, men are doing something like 95 minutes per day they are spending on care work in a household, but women are spending nearly 266 or 277, something of that kind, which is almost 4 hours, more than 4 hours in a 24-hour cycle. And so I think those kind of questions only a technical person working on gender can ask. But then you have to look at it in other spheres as well.
Right, go beyond the compliance thing and internalize it more than just imbibing it. Right. To that end, then, advancing gender equality empowers women and girls, but it also empowers other marginalized groups. But can you tell us exactly how that happens? Any examples, any stories that jump out to you?
So many. I mean, I've spent more than 30 years working in the field with women communities in rural areas. Now, increasingly, also a little bit in urban areas. And I think that what happens is that when you do this kind of work with women, they are going to be the ones who are going to challenge what are known as accepted norms. And very often all of us, boys and girls, all of us get imbibed into a culture through the interactions with our parents, with the communities, with the stories we hear. And when you do gender kind of sensitization, when you build women's leadership, what happens is that you are building a critical awareness among women. And I think that's what I would call as work around gender equality, where you build women's ability to think critically and ask questions which are necessary to be asked in their context. So when women start asking that, why are we assuming that only, the girl should get married by the age of so and so? But then you also ask the question, can I look at considering men doing other work? And then I find that many women are then open to their boys wanting to say, I want to do some creative work. I don't want to do, being a farmer. I don't want to take up a government job. Especially these are the kind of aspirations most of the times, you find in communities where the secure jobs are seen as government jobs, a teacher's job, and jobs which are like to do with physical labor are seen as those who are condemned to, not lead a good life. And so when mothers are realized that if they are going to promote the girls' education, they're also going to support the aspirations of those boys who may not want to go into fulfilling the typical male aspirations that come about. So I think this is how I feel that these are pathways where when women raise their voice, when women start thinking critically, when women start challenging things, many of your traditional structures will also start rethinking or will be forced to realign. Not to say that there is no backlash. I think there is huge backlash that women themselves, women's collectives constantly have to face, because patriarchy just re-emerges in different forms. So I think there is a backlash which continues. But I think that we have to see that when women are asking critical questions, the community also has to stand up and respond. There is no other way. And then there will be slowly chinks in the armor. We have a long way to go, but I think that I've seen enough experiences of where the community then stands up. There are enough stories where men who did not support the woman when she went out for a training program, suspected her, but 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, when they see that the woman is able to go and speak up to a sarpanch, or the woman is able to go and speak to a government official at the block level, the husband suddenly realized that, oh, I didn't realize that my wife has so much authority and capability. And then these men say that, okay, you have to go for a meeting, you go, I'll take care of something, I'll take care of the kid. And so the man is changing. And so that's how I think slowly, definitely the community also shifts. I would not use the word gain, because then it makes it more instrumental. I think that it's that communities have to transform themselves. That again brings us to the gender transformative component that we talked about earlier.
Is there anything you'd like to share with young evaluators who are watching, and especially in the context of the Eval Fest 2024?
Yeah, I think it's amazing that we've had full house at this conference, which obviously says that there is a big need and there's a growing acknowledgement that evaluations are critical, because then we get to measure what is changing and what is not changing. And I think that yesterday I was in a panel where some of the younger team members had done a landscaping analysis of what's available in India in terms of capacity building. And they found that there isn't enough gender integration happening in the capacity building courses that are being designed. And ISST is perhaps the only organization that offers 2 courses which are called Facilitating Gender Transformative Evaluations for early and mid-career professionals and for senior professionals. And I think that we need those who have maybe done courses like this to also, think of how this can be amplified, and we would be happy to collaborate with young evaluators who are, going out in the field and discovering and have conversations that will help us to inform us. And I think for them we can offer lenses, conversations to become sharper in integrating gender in all their work that they are doing.
I'm sure the message has been very well received by the young evaluators. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you so much for this opportunity.